Right now, in the Greater Toronto Area, there are roughly 15,000 brand new, fully completed condos sitting empty, lights off, balconies untouched, keys waiting in lockboxes that no one is turning. And at the exact same time, the very companies responsible for building housing in this city are collapsing at the fastest pace seen in 3 decades. Pause there for a second. A city with a housing crisis, a city where people compete for rentals with vacancy rates scraping the floor, a city where affordability is discussed like a national emergency, and yet thousands of finished homes are vacant while builders are filing for insolvency in record numbers. That's not a normal correction. It's not a typical downturn. It's something stranger, more structural, and frankly more serious. According to the Canadian Association of Insolvency and Restructuring Professionals, 1,247 construction companies across the GTA went insolvent in 2025 alone. That's a 43% jump over the year before. Projections running through 2026 suggest the total will land closer to 1,559 by the time the year closes. Let that number settle in. Not 15 companies, not 150. Over 1,500 construction businesses in one metropolitan region gone in roughly 18 months. The question that keeps resurfacing is painfully simple. How does an industry responsible for solving a housing shortage implode in the middle of that shortage? The answer is less dramatic than people expect, and more damaging. It starts with something called a fixed-price contract. Strip away the jargon and it works like this. Imagine you run a catering company. In early 2022, someone books you for a massive event the following year. You calculate food costs, labor, rentals, energy, transportation. You price it carefully. They sign. The price is locked. Then inflation hits like a freight train. Food, labor, fuel, everything surges. By the time the event arrives, your costs are up 50%. But the contract says what it says. You deliver the event at yesterday's prices while paying today's expenses. Every plate you serve loses money. You can't renegotiate. You can't walk away without legal consequences. You finish the job and absorb the loss. That's essentially what happened to builders across the GTA, except at scale and with far bigger numbers. In 2022 and 2023, developers signed fixed-price construction contracts averaging about $220 per square foot. By early 2026, data from Statistics Canada showed construction costs had climbed to roughly $332 per square foot, a 51% increase. 51%. That's not something you trim through efficiency. It's not a rounding error. It's a structural mismatch between revenue locked in the past and expenses exploding in the present. Lumber spiked over 60%. Steel climbed. Labor costs rose. Diesel, the fuel behind cranes, excavation equipment, delivery trucks, jumped roughly 40%. And then there's financing, the quiet pressure most people forget. Builders borrow heavily. Projects are leveraged. Every extra month in a high-rate environment compounds interest costs that were never part of the original budget. Carry a 2022 project into 2026, and the financing alone can feel like another 50% layered onto the burden. Picture a 200-unit condo along the Eglinton corridor. Contract value, $88 million. In 2022, the numbers penciled out. Margins weren't massive, but they worked. Fast forward to 2026, and the same construction activities cost over $132 million. Revenue remains $88 million, working capital drains. 14 months later, insolvency papers are filed. Now multiply that scenario across 1,500 companies. Altus Group estimated roughly $44.8 billion in cost overruns embedded in stalled or failed GTA projects. That number doesn't just represent lost profit. It represents half-built towers, idle cranes, and concrete skeletons you've probably driven past without knowing the backstory. But the builders are only the headline. When a construction company collapses, attention usually centers on buyers and projects. Yet the first financial shockwave hits subcontractors, plumbers, electricians, framers, drywall crews, the people physically building these towers. Standard practice often means roughly 40% paid up front. The remaining 60% is tied to milestones. When insolvency hits, that 60% freezes. It enters receivership, and receivership isn't quick. On average, trade contractors recover about 14 cents on the dollar after a process that can drag on nearly 3 years. They did the work. They submitted invoices. Then they wait 28 months and see 14% returned. Across the GTA, nearly 3,900 subcontractors were directly affected, with unpaid balances around $2.73 billion. Most of that money doesn't come back. The fallout moves like a wave. Structural crews lose cash flow first. They shut down or pivot. Later trades arrive to find the ground already eroded beneath them. In some clusters, over two-thirds of subcontractors ceased operations within 3 months of a builder filing. At full scale, estimates suggest over 100,000 job impacts when you account for suppliers, logistics, and indirect employment. Roughly $18 billion in GDP impact. That's no longer a construction issue. It's a regional economic issue. And then there are the buyers. Between 2022 and 2025, about 68,000 people in the GTA bought pre-construction condos, not flippers, not speculators. Many were families choosing the most accessible path to ownership. They put down deposits averaging $240,000. Years of savings. Across the region, more than 8,000 units are canceled outright or stalled without occupancy certificates. Thousands of families are in limbo, still paying rent, still servicing life as usual, while their deposit sits inside a legal process they don't control. The warranty backstop, administered through Tarion, received over 2,100 claims tied to stalled and canceled projects in 2025. Roughly 69% were denied, often because cost escalation wasn't covered under warranty terms. So the mechanism designed to protect buyers in builder failures doesn't necessarily apply to the specific type of builder failure that happened. Processing backlogs stretch beyond 2 years. Tens of thousands of families remain denied or waiting. Meanwhile, housing starts in Q1 2025 dropped 79%, according to Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. Downtown Toronto and key corridors saw declines above 85%, from roughly 2,500 monthly units at baseline to about 2,600, the lowest since the late 1980s. And here's the paradox. 15,000 finished condos sit unsold. Yet rental vacancy is under 1%, and rents have surged year over year. It looks like a supply problem. It's partly a pricing problem disguised as supply. Many of those finished units were priced for investor expectations that never materialized. They weren't priced for the income reality of end users, so they sit empty while renters compete fiercely for available apartments. Both realities coexist. Completions in 2025 may appear strong, around 31,000 units, but that's pipeline momentum from contracts signed years ago. After that, forecasts taper sharply. By 2028, completions could fall below 10,000 units for the entire GTA, under 10,000 in a region of millions with sub 1% vacancy. Those buildings would need to break ground now to meet 2028 timelines. Many aren't. That portion of the supply curve is already written. Layer onto this something called Phoenix activity. Roughly 37% of insolvent builder entities showed signs of reconstituting under new corporate names after filing, legal under safe harbor provisions. Debts remain in the old entity. The new entity starts fresh. Contracts resume. It's lawful. It's structured. But to a subcontractor waiting years for 14 cents on the dollar, it can feel surreal. Add international capital shifts, steel import pressures, tariff impacts, skilled labor shortages, with immigration bringing in about half the tradespeople the industry says it needs, and the constraints multiply. The longer sites stay dormant, the more labor drifts elsewhere. You don't rebuild that capacity overnight. So where does this lead? Most projections suggest continued elevated insolvencies through 2026 and 2027. Completions falling through 2028. A widening supply deficit relative to provincial targets. Vacancy potentially compressing further. The single variable with the power to materially shift the trajectory is interest rates from the Bank of Canada. Lower borrowing costs improve project feasibility and buyer qualification simultaneously. Without that relief, the math for many new projects still doesn't pencil out. None of this fits neatly into a headline. The system isn't malfunctioning in a dramatic, cinematic way. It's operating within its rules and producing outcomes that feel misaligned with what the city actually needs. Empty condos, bankrupt builders, frozen deposits, idle cranes, subcontractors waiting years for partial recovery, rental pressure tightening, future supply thinning before it even begins. Something will adjust. Markets always do. The unresolved question is who absorbs the cost of that adjustment and how long that absorption takes. Because the buildings that would solve 2028 aren't breaking ground today, and that reality is already locked in.